Alright boys, Infographics made a video about Nepal government, so let's
What
watch it.
happens when politics collides with the power of Gen Z? First came the social media bans, next weeks of violent protests, then tens of thousands gathered to reshape their country, all via a social media app. This is one of the wildest political stories in years, and maybe even the start of a
I think it's not a social
Gen Z revolution. On
right?
today's episode of the Infographic Show, we're revealing how one nation's politics were turned upside down, and it was all done on Discord. Nepal is one of Asia's small
Well, apparently it's not just a Discord cause people were on the streets, dude.
smaller countries, but it is one of the most geographically significant and most troubled. Located in the Himalayan mountains, sandwiched between India and China, it's been ruled by a Hindu monarchy for generations. However, a growing Chinese population and deeper Chinese government involvement in Nepal's affairs have led to turmoil, threatening the country's stability and long-term future.
What?
So, in some ways,
Are they sponsored by India somehow?
the current chaos has been a long time coming. The
Like-
first major crisis happened in 2001. Crown Prince Dipendra went on a shooting rampage at the
Wait, you don't know that yet.
royal palace, killing the king and queen as well as 7 other members of the family. That
You don't know that yet.
left Dipendra as the heir and the new king of Nepal, except that he was in a coma due to a bullet in his brain. He died 3 days later and was replaced by his brother. This was seen as a boost to the Maoist revolutionaries making war in the country, and that led to the decline of the monarchy. But it wouldn't fade away easily. The current king, Gyanendra, who replaced his murderous brother, attempted to depose the Nepali Congress in 2005 and reinstated an absolute monarchy. But it wouldn't last. Only a year later, massive protests led to the king giving up some power. This was primarily due to a truce between pro-democracy protesters and the Maoist revolutionaries, creating a unified front against the monarchy.
Yeah,
The
we
monarchy was
lost
overthrown
everything.
in 2008, and the country transitioned to a democracy. But the new government was soon condemned for its authoritarian tendencies. At the same time, it struggled against mounting foreign influence and rising domestic discontent. And things would boil over in 2025. In February
Facts.
2025, at a commemoration of the 1951 revolution, the former king published a video address condemning the current communist-led government. While he didn't explicitly call for restoring the monarchy, the speech was seen as a rallying point for the monarchists,
What the fuck is this video about?
especially given how unpopular the current government
Is he trying to extend everything?
was
Like the
due to
entire
corruption and
situation?
economic crisis. The government quickly cracked down, banning large protests and hunger strikes. But when a pro-monarchist group rallied in the streets of Kathmandu, the police responded with a heavy hand.
Durga
2
Pasai.
people were killed and 45 more injured. The former king was blamed for the unrest, with the government planning to seize his passport. But it turned out to be just a small appetizer for what was to come. Nepal's crackdown on dissent was growing since the monarchist protests, and in September 2025 it was hitting a fever pitch. Over the past few years, the government has introduced several new taxes, including one in 2022 that targeted social media platforms and other digital services,
Alright.
as well as value-added taxes on all foreign e-service providers. All of these platforms would have to immediately register with the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology. But many top platforms refused to comply with those onerous obligations. And all at once, social media in Nepal went dark. Facebook, X, YouTube, and Reddit went offline, along with Snapchat and even lesser-used platforms like LinkedIn and Signal. On the surface, this was the government following
Wait,
through
is
on
Signal
its threat
that much
to make
used?
these companies pay up.
What
But
Signal?
other people argued this was just a cover. Social media was key to
I didn't know
organizing the
Signal was-
pro-monarchy protests. But feeds in Nepal were dominated by a recent trend exposing nepotism in Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli's government. The long-standing leader of the Communist Party in Nepal,
Well, it's more about Nepo babies, to be honest.
this was his 3rd stint as prime minister, and he was seen as out of touch and increasingly authoritarian. What would follow were some of the craziest days in Nepal's history, and some of the most violent. If the government thought that shutting down social media would calm tensions, they were extremely wrong. Tensions were rising fast over income inequality in Nepal, with the average citizen earning the equivalent of $1,400 a year. This was coupled with seething resentment as the ruling elite flaunted their wealth, the intended opposite
The
of what a communist
kids
government
flaunted
would
their
claim to do.
wealth.
Nepal is also a young skewing country, with the median age being 25, and the average Gen Z Nepali was tired of the hopeless future they saw in front of them,
Facts.
and cutting them off from the world was the last straw. Nepal isn't an easy country to live in, with most of the country having rural terrain. Social media is extremely popular, and many people rely on it for work. So turning off social media wasn't just making the average young person angry, it was making them furious with absolutely nothing to lose. The high unemployment rate and high migration abroad meant that those who were still in the country were determined to fight for it. So many
That's
began
true.
looking for a way to coordinate a much bigger response, and they found it online. A few social media sites remained online, particularly Discord and Instagram.
No, I think Instagram was banned, but Discord was still alive because that all stupid people, all politicians, don't know what a Discord is. So I mean, they're active on Instagram and Facebook and everywhere, but they
They
don't know
quickly
Discord.
became gathering places for rebellion. As anyone who's ever tried to explain to their grandparents how to set up an account knows, the older generation usually isn't great with social media.
Facts, like the old prime minister and those top three stupid
This
old
gave the Gen
ass.
Z rebels an impressive blind spot to make their elaborate plans without detection by the government authorities.
That's
But
true.
as details emerged, it became clear this wasn't just a small grassroots movement. Tens of thousands of Nepalis gathered on Discord, though the channels remained vulnerable to outside trolls. But as the rebellion transferred to the real world, things took a dramatic turn. The first major protest took place on September 8th in Kathmandu, centered around the federal parliament building.
I mean,
Tens of
I
thousands
mean,
of
not
activists
just
showed up,
Kathmandu,
and the
right? It
government
was all
taken
over the
by
country.
surprise at the ferocity. Officially, this was organized by Hami Nepal, a charity organization focusing on earthquake
Really?
relief. But things went sideways when one
I mean, they were just there to help, right?
activist reportedly threw a rock at a TV camera, and the government cracked down hard. As protesters were beaten, they responded with violence.
They were not beaten, they were fucking shot. I have a video of my friend's friend who's like, you, the other guy literally carried his brain in his hand and showed to the police and begged to stop shooting them. That's what the most traumatized video I have ever
And all
watched.
hell broke loose. The protesters, enraged by the attacks on their fellow activists, began to storm the parliament. The security forces unleashed a combo of non-lethal weapons like tear gas and rubber bullets, along with live ammunition.
Real bullets, get your facts straight. Infographics, real fucking bullets.
A curfew was declared, but it didn't disperse the enraged crowds. When the smoke cleared, over 50 people were killed and around 350 injured. The anger was so
I don't think
overwhelming
50
that
people
the
were
government
killed on
felt
the
it had
first
to
day.
make some concessions, including lifting the ban on the prohibited social media platforms. But once a flame is lit, it doesn't go out easily. The Home Minister had resigned the day before, but as soon as Prime Minister Sharma Oli realized how big the rebellion was becoming, he resigned, but not before ordering his remaining ministers to hold steady. As the next day dawned, he fled to an army barracks and tried to ride out the crisis. But by
Thanks.
this point, the protest movement had become self-sustaining. The rebels demanded more than just a new face in power. They wanted everything to change. Across Nepal, major government institutions were targeted, including the Supreme Court and the headquarters of the Communist Party. The previous day, the violence primarily
Not, I don't think not just the Communist Party. It was all the parties, headquarters that were targeted, and Communist was the one, like the Maoists were the one that was not targeted that much.
came from the government. But on September 9th, the protesters struck back. They didn't just attack the government buildings, they attacked the residences of government officials, burning them. The main parliament building also found itself in flames, and the military, which started the day looking to restore order, found itself trying to facilitate evacuations of prominent officials. As protesters descended on the airport to try to stop the evacuations, the army took over and grounded planes. And it seemed like no location was safe. Even the newly built Hilton Hotel in Kathmandu, seen as a symbol of the elite, was set on fire.
Because it was owned by ex prime minister's son, and they are not supposed to have that much money if he had earned it illegally.
It was clear the old order in Nepal was done. The only question was, what would replace it? The rage kept building, turning protests into the beginnings of a revolution. Protesters targeted prominent politicians' residences, and even their families in some cases. Large-scale fires were set, and several people were killed, although the identities of the dead haven't been conclusively revealed. The finance minister was even stripped of his clothes and
Yeah,
chased
that
into
that
a
was
river,
funny.
and the battle was about to shift to a new environment. Over the years, the government had imprisoned countless people for political offenses. Protesters now set their sights on freeing them. In the chaos, several prisoners were attacked and
Yeah.
even set on fire, while others managed to escape.
I
The
mean, they were
government
not
tried
set
to
on
put down the
fire.
protests, but it was largely unsuccessful. More police were reportedly killed than prisoners that day. Monarchists tried to take advantage
No.
of the chaos, but it seemed likely that something new
Hey, somebody in the infographics team needs to literally do some proper research because that's not true.
would emerge from the chaos.
I mean, the cops were killed, like a few cops were killed, but I didn't think prisoners were set in fucking fire because a fucking prisoner went back home, killed his fucking wife, and came back to the jail to like arrest himself,
Instead.
and that was fucking crazy.
But first, an old element would try to take control. On the evening of September 9th, the Army announced that it would now take control of the situation and restore law and order. The Army was seen as a neutral broker now that the government wasn't in charge anymore. Chief of Army Staff Ashok Raj Sigdel made a point to try to open dialogue with the rebel groups. As the morning of September 10th dawned, the sight of Army troops in the street was a welcome sign of order to some and a threat to others. The Army concentrated on cracking down on the worst agitators, seizing weapons and largely allowing the protesters to make their voices heard. While some protesters continued violent activities and targeted government buildings, the pace seemed to be slowing down. Some protesters even started cleaning up the damage of the previous day. But behind the scenes, something remarkable was happening. Revolutions in the past have been much more straightforward. They're often targeting a monarch who doesn't answer to anyone. They tend to have a clear-cut rebel leader who is primed to take control, and in the case of the Russian and French revolutions, often became a dictator themselves. The goal is to replace one government with another, but that wasn't the case in Nepal. The protests were heavily directed by young citizens
That's
with
true.
no governmental experience and no desire to take charge of the country's affairs themselves.
Yeah.
But the fate of the country was now in their hands. The protests had spiraled out of control and had drifted far from their original intentions. While the initial rage was fueled by inequality, the movement soon drew in militant Marxist factions.
Inequality? I mean, inequality in wages and money.
Some were tied to China, others were pro-monarchists eager to push their own vision of the government. The protest organizers distanced themselves from the violence, and soon the violence began to dial back, with no further protests scheduled from the 10th onward. And now it was time to determine what came next. While the government had resigned, there hadn't been an election to depose or replace them. The military was ostensibly in charge of restoring order to the streets, and
Yeah.
had been very cautious to make clear that this was not a military coup, and it seemed to work. The protesters didn't directly engage with the military save for a few isolated conflagrations, but that was because they didn't view the military as a continuation of the oppressive government. And to establish a new government, they went back to where it all began. Much of the protests were organized on one of the few social media sites still available, Discord,
It's not. Like,
a site that combines interactive forums with free internet phone calls. It allows users to
it's not. It was not organized on fucking Discord.
create a private Discord available only by invitation for discussing personal plans, video game strategy, or anything else, even revolutions. The private Nepali Discords created at the beginning of the crisis were key for organizing outside of the government's overbearing eye, and now it would be the key to selecting the new government. Discord
I don't think it was organized for the fucking protest.
currently has over 200
Or am I wrong? Because I think I was on the Discord on the day of the protest.
million monthly users, with 90% of them there to play video games. But even the remaining 10% carry a lot of weight. It's become one of the favorite platforms among Gen Z users in recent years, enjoying the privacy in comparison to other more public sites like Facebook and X. It's believed the key Discord that organized the protest had over 100,000 participants, and they were able to log in and check in with the state of the chaos as the protests raged. It led some people to say that this Discord was now essentially the parliament
Yeah.
of Nepal.
There was a meme calling Federal Discord Parliament of
Nepal,
Nepal.
and they had a near impossible task ahead of them. While the server was full of young activists, it did have a central leadership in the form of the charity group Hami Nepal.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
had been dealing with the government extensively, and they knew the delicate balancing act of picking new leadership. Any interim prime minister would have to be acceptable to the activists who dominated the protests, hardline rebels who inserted themselves into the conflict, and the army. If anyone with ties to the old government was chosen, the rebels might strike again. If a
Yeah.
radical took power, the army might stage a coup. Nothing new for the country. And
I was in that fucking Discord for 12 fucking hours, and there were about 13 to 14,000 people in their Discord call talking about whom to select as the interim prime minister of Nepal, and that was fucking craziest night. I had never been in a Discord call for that fucking long.
now it was time to vote.
And the conversation was going round and round, and like everybody was trying to say the own thing. I mean, everybody was trying to say the same thing in their own world, in their own word.
One of the most surprising things about this event was not just that the election took place on Discord,
It did not take place in fucking Discord, like.
but that the military approved of it. The army leadership reportedly met with the organizers of the Discord and asked them for help picking an interim leader. And so began days of fevered debate, with just about everyone under consideration. They included people involved in the infrastructure of the country, like former electricity chief Kulmangi Singh and even cricket star Sagar Dakal. And it wasn't easy to keep the Discord on topic. Over the days of the debate, the Discord gained 45,000 new members, and unfortunately not all of them were there to pick the government. Many were outsiders either looking for an inside view of the crisis that was
That's true,
unfolding
like
around the
me.
world, or to troll and cause trouble. But through
There were so many fucking Indians in that Discord group trying to say, "Oh, Nepal should just give up and become a part of India." Like, shut the fuck up.
it all, the virtual conclave continued their work, and everyone waited to see who they would pick to lead Nepal into the future.
And
And
that's true.
surprisingly, it was a familiar figure. To the relief of many who feared a radical revolutionary new government in Nepal, the group settled on a figure acceptable to all sides, Sushila Karki. She had served as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court from 2016 to 2017 and had a long career in Nepali politics before that. She even played a role in the 1990 People's Movement to overthrow an oppressive government and was imprisoned for her efforts. Years later, Karki nearly faced impeachment after being accused of challenging the government's power from the court. Equally important, Karki is the first woman to lead Nepal. At 73, she's likely to be a caretaker prime minister, focused on bringing stability to the country rather than consolidating power for herself.
Yeah.
After the Discord settled on Karki, the morning of September 11th, 2025 would make it official. The president, the head of the army, and several
It's the prime minister. Like, a new president has been elected. Like, dude,
representatives of the
should I comment down?
protesters met at army headquarters and named Karki as their choice. There was fear that the Communist Party's Maoist wing would try to push one of their
Yeah.
candidates, but they didn't contest the choice and urged their
Fuck
supporters to
Prasanda.
work within the democratic system. The next day, Karki would be inaugurated, and the same day the president dissolved parliament, throwing the
Yeah, the crazy part is, when I was in like, when I was deep in the PUBG mobile scene, I knew, I used to play, but I knew a girl whose grandfather was Prasanda. That's funny.
Nepal's government into limbo, and the future is uncertain
I should have
for
called her
Nepal
out.
and everywhere else. While the new government was selected through democratic means of sorts, it still wasn't a formal election. The new government wanted to make it clear that this wasn't a coup or a revolution, the kind the country had plenty of in the past. Karki's government would be a caretaker administration, and new elections for a full parliament would be held on March 5th, 2026, and not on Discord. This was seen as a way to
that's
quickly
true.
calm the people who thought the future of Nepal was in the air. And soon, the toll of the rebellion became clear. When all the smoke cleared, it was revealed that the death toll was 72 known casualties, at least 21 of them protesters, 9 prisoners, 3 police officers, and 18 not identified.
I don't
It's
think
believed that some of
I
the
didn't
latter
hear
were
any
politicians.
prisoner
Even
killed.
more shocking, over 1,300 people were injured in the conflict. Soon after the protests ceased, the curfew in Kathmandu was lifted. Prime Minister Karki reached out to injured protesters in the hospital and began
Yeah.
the process of arranging compensation. It seemed like a new calm was settling over in Nepal, in what was, by historical comparison, a revolution with very low casualties. But could it be the start of a massive new trend? Several things caught the attention of the world about this upheaval. For one thing, it was the first revolution in a long time fully spearheaded by young people. And it
I
was
mean,
certainly the
Indonesia
only
did
one
it
arranged
first,
on social
right?
media. As global tensions rise, many began to ask whether this was the spark for a new wave of revolutions. In a word, no. Nepal had several things about it that made a revolution like this far more likely. It had a deeply unsettled political scene, with
Yeah.
several coups and revolutions in the last few decades alone. It's also a much smaller country than most
I don't think
powerful
there was
nations
coup.
around the world. Its population
Like,
could easily make its way to
get
the
a fact-
capital to make its
Get the facts
displeasure
straight,
very well known.
infographics. I
That
love
made
the
it easier
videos.
for protesters to overwhelm the military and make their demands seem reasonable by comparison. And the opposition had one unified message: down with corruption, down with oppression. And to
Yeah.
put it lightly, that is not the case anywhere else. Most protest movements are far less unified than what we saw in Nepal. But across the world, there is still reason to look at a new era. This was the first revolution ever live streamed on social media, with activists sharing tactics and broadcasting protest scenes live to the world as they happened. And it drove home that social media is a tool like any other, and one that can be invaluable in crisis situations. If there is any issue that's likely to unify people like this again, it might be social media itself. And few things unite people like their connections being ripped away. It's too early to tell what the story of the Nepal social media revolution will ultimately be. Right
Yeah,
now,
that's
the government
true.
is in the hands of a trusted establishment figure, but the March election could bring power to a more radical voice, or even see the
Hey,
traditionalists strike back.
we
But the
we
one
have
thing
to
that is clear
boycott
is
those
that armed
top
with
3
only
parties.
social media and a passion for change, the youth of Nepal spoke with one voice and brought down a government. And millions of young people around the world are looking at them and thinking, hey, they've got some good ideas. For an inside look at how bloody revolutions can
Hey, that's another video by infographics about Nepal, but they need to do some fact checks because not everything they said was correct.